Welcome back for the 5th episode. Yes, we've made it that far. The 5th episode of the Bridgestone Club podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Doyle, and today we've got a special returning guest, back by popular demand. I've been told how good he was on the mic and how well he represented himself, and I'm still yet to receive a compliment. So welcome back, Ollie Mitchell. How are you doing, pal?
I'm good. It's a pleasure to be back on, and exciting that we're doing it so close to the start of the season.
I know, but honest to God, I just cannot wait. And it feels like it's been so long. It
has
not
really.
that long ago, but it feels like every sport ends together. And then we've had no British basketball, no NBA. I've had the WNBA thingy, but like obviously on your Saturdays and Sundays, it's just basketball galore normally, isn't it? So we've really missed out, I think.
Yeah, when the football starts so much earlier as well, it's like you can really feel how little basketball there is around.
I can't wait. Talking about football, I was keeping an eye on EFC Wimbledon. They now are getting on.
Yeah.
Seems like a bit of a mixed start for you.
Well, honestly, I think most people thought we'd go straight back down, so I'm very happy, really. I think it's equal amount of wins and losses, which is, it's mid-table, bang in the middle, which is a lot more than I think most people are expecting. So take what I can get, really.
And I mean, it's football league, isn't it? So it's the longest season going, you might have and it's not a bad start, it's a really good one, so you're not far off playoffs, but it only takes one good run to go up to playoffs or one bad run and you're in a relegation battle.
It's a crazy play. I mean, especially the championship, if you go one level up, suddenly every team, 1 month can completely change everything. You look, Leeds United a couple of years ago looked like the best team that had ever been in that league and then didn't get promoted. It's the exact kind of competition you want. And hopefully we'll have that kind of open competition in British basketball this season.
That's a good segue. That is a good segue, Ollie.
It's what I do. It's what I do.
That's why we brought you back on, because I'm no good at it, so I needed someone to do it for us. So we'll start, obviously, with the Super League Basketball Women, which is, obviously, as an Eagles fan, I can't wait for it, but it's a bit of a broken up squad, but we'll get into that.
Yeah.
So first game, we've got 2 p.m, Manchester first, Caledonia, which to me is actually a really, really interesting game. I don't know what you think about it, Ollie, but you look at Manchester, I wasn't sure what direction they were going, because the men's team's obviously kicked on, brought in a lot of good players, but then they didn't really announce many signing, but they've got a really interesting roster, a lot of American imports who I can't pretend to know a lot of them. I know I've seen a couple of them play in the NCAA like randomly, but they're not like big stars who you can focus on. Then Caledonia, who I was really rooting for before they decided to steal a certain player who we will talk about off the Newcastle Eagles.
I'm sure we will.
So out of the two, Manchester and Caledonia, how do you think that game's going to turn out?
Start of the season is always going to be really tricky to work out. As you said, there aren't really that many changes with Manchester. David Adele, it's a player of the year, leaving it is obviously going to be big. Anastasia Warren's gone to Caledonia. They're probably the two big losses. But then they've brought in 2 players that, between them in their respective leagues, have 41 points on average, so per game, which is a huge addition for any team. And so that's Franny Hottinger. She's been in the DBBL in Germany, 16 points on average. And then Jenna Mastiglione, I think I've said it right, but
who knows? I was going to try and pronounce it later, but I'm glad you give it a go.
Yeah, she was averaging 23 points in Portugal, and obviously it's hard to work out the respective levels between the leagues, especially when so few players actually come over from Portugal to SLB or BBL or whatever. But, if those guys can bring those numbers over, they'll be doing very well going forward. But then at the same time, Caledonia have got some big names coming in. Maura Fitzpatrick as well from Manchester.
Yeah.
Moving over, and then she who shall not be named for you.
Because honestly, she's one of my favourite players, Hodges, and I just... there was someone who said it on Twitter, X, and I was like, shut up, that's never going to happen. And
I remember at the time.
I had no sources, and then I seen it, and I was like, is someone knowing something that I don't know? So obviously she signed on, and I don't know what you think, but I think that is like a game-changing signing for them when you see who they've brought onto the roster. It feels like she does complete it a bit. I don't know how you feel, but they're going to be up there challenging for me, personally.
Yeah, I think it's the biggest sort of cross SLB signing. There aren't a crazy amount of them, really, but for sure this is the standout one for me. 19 points for any team is going to be a big addition. And I thought Caledonia were very good towards the end of last season, and I think some of the players that they brought in, another Bryn Masakevich in BL1 over in Australia, she's averaging 18 points. That's a lot of points that they're adding into their team, and they've only really lost a couple of players. Obviously Erin McGarrishan's been there a long time, and Delaney Byrne. People seem to be in two minds about what her name is. I think it's Byrne. I've
I would
seen
say
Bryn all over the
I
place.
want to go with Burn, but I have heard
Byrne
both
makes way more sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think
don't
so.
know. It seems to be a real problem in this league that names are spelt wrong. I remember when Laura Zolper signed for the Hatters, on her shirt it said Zoppler, and we were commentary. We were saying Zoppler and thinking, hang on, that's not right. I wrote Zolper down, and it took us a while to work out. But yeah, they've only lost a couple of players. They've brought in some really, really good players. So I'm really excited. I think these guys are probably... I think it's hard because so many players have left the Eagles. The Eagles have made a lot of good signings. Gladiators and Manchester are probably about at the same level as the Eagles, I think, having looked at who's signed, who's left.
Yeah.
But as I say, it's really hard to work out. It's going to be a really exciting one, though. Seeing two of those teams where I'm so unsure whether they'll be right at the top or just that level below, playing against each other in one game. And as always, it's a really good opportunity to see how players from different countries are adapting into the game. Will it take them longer to adapt? We don't know. It's really hard, but it'll be exciting either way.
I think that's one of the exciting bits as well, because you get the imports coming over, and especially with like the women's basketball, it's really hard to get a grip of who's going to be brilliant coming into the league. But you always
so
seem to
hard,
get
yeah.
that one standout, like Jada Gwynn last year. She came in and she just tore it up. And you obviously coming over, you're like, oh, she sounds good, she's got the stats there, and then they come and they light it up. So that's what I'm hoping for on the Eagles roster. When you look at Eagles versus the Hatters, obviously that was a showdown that we all looked forward to in the playoffs last year. How do you feel that might go in the opening game? Because obviously a lot of changes for Newcastle. You lose Psyche, you lose Hodges, you lose Gwynn, and that's just to name three.
Yeah.
It seems like Sheffield have kept quite a good core together. You've lost Tyre Singleton, who is probably going to be a big loss, but obviously again we don't know who's coming in and the caliber of player. It seems like you guys have kept a core together. Do you think that gives you the advantage come Sunday?
Yeah, I think keeping the core is actually less important for the Hatters than most teams, because I've mentioned before how well the Hatters' sort of style of play seems to be instilled by every single player by Vanessa Ellis. But I agree in that when you've got a playoff winning side, and a side that actually probably, if it wasn't for a wobble mid-season, would have been right up there in the championship as well. You know, keeping those guys together is huge. Confirmed, there's only 3 players. In fact, there's actually only 2 players confirmed to have left. I haven't seen anything about Zaya Black next year, but you know, between Laura Zolper and Tyre Singleton, they were both averaging 16 points. And obviously Singleton had such a presence in the paint as well that's being lost. But actually, if you look at the players that have come in, already we know Marina Fernandez-Pardo, who I was completely compvinced would go to you guys. It was an incredibly exciting one for me.
It just seemed
Exactly,
like
yeah. But she's coming in and she's bringing, you know, an average of 11 points in a very poor team. And I think she was an incredibly sort of talismanic player in that she seemed to bring up every single player around her for the Palatinates last year. Obviously, she doesn't necessarily need to do that in a higher quality side, but she's bringing in a lot of quality and probably more so a lot of leadership, which I think is good. But then if you look at Grace Graham, she's a signing from the Big V League. So that's kind of, I think, just below the NBL one in terms of the quality, but she's been putting up 20 points. We've got Sharon Stubbs, who's been putting in 16 points in her senior year over in college, basketball in the States. And then Megan Mullings, who is in NBL 1. We seem to like shopping over there in that league. She's also been putting up 16 points. And for comparison, in terms of the quality of the leagues, Emma Gandini, I think, was putting up about 13 in her season before signing. So the fact that Megan Mullings is putting up more than her shows that she's probably the kind of player that can step in and probably do pretty well in this league.
It seems like as well you're building from a place of strength, aren't you? Like you don't win the playoff championship if you're not a good team. And then of course we've got Oaklands, who have they've retained some players, but obviously losing Sam Ashby's a big, which we will touch on, is kind of a big loss for them. So I am very, very curious as to how they'll get on this year, but it seems like a big opportunity for the Sheffield Hatters to kind of build where they came on from. And I think it's going to be a really important season for Georgia Gale, who you touched on last time. You said throughout the season she kind of grew into the season. What would you expect from her this year? Do you expect maybe another step up? Or do you think it's going to be another one where she's getting used to what's around her and then taking the step later on in the season?
I think it's quite a nice season for her this year because, the club didn't even compete in the league one year, just a few years back, in different arenas, and obviously a huge turnover of players, as it has been with most clubs in the division over a number of years. This is probably the first year where there isn't a huge change. I think it was quite a short roster last year. I think it was normally about 10 players. There were never 12 players on that game day roster, really. And fantastic players. There were 10 players of a very good level, but it wasn't a huge one, which means actually the players that are coming in probably aren't going to replace too many players, if you know what I mean. So she's not having to adapt as much as normal. And I think there's a lot more consistency in terms of where the training is and who she's training with, knowing that the team is in a good place, knowing that the team's got money. I think it's probably coming off winning the first league title in 10 years as well, there's always going to be that confidence. She's been one of the big names in terms of the SLB's marketing. She's had her name up on the O2. She's been modelling the new jumpers and T-shirts. And it's just about how she handles that pressure, because I think everyone knows who Georgia Gale is now. If you're interested in British women's basketball, you know Georgia Gale. She's been around the place for a long time. This was a real standout year for her. She's obviously been off the 3x3 for GB, and she's coming back with high expectations, but I think she is the kind of player that can kind of ride off that. The Hatters honestly really, really need that, I think, because she really does bring that mood up and down.
Yeah, well, that's a point I'll touch on then, because like you said, they're pressure, and pressure does bring a lot of expectation. So to play devil's advocate, is that possibly a bad thing for her, or do you think she's got the mentality where, because you said last time when it felt like when she was playing, sometimes she would get frustrated and she felt like she was kind of carrying the team. Does that mean that pressure might affect her negatively, or do you believe, because I believe she has, do you believe she's got the correct mindset to handle that and maybe lead this team to a second championship? Or is that pressure just going to be a bit too much?
I think she really learned how to play with the players around her towards the end of last season. I think I mentioned the game, I can't remember which one it was, it was right near the end of the season. It might have been against the Rebels in a game where I think Maria Blaszczewski was fouled something like 11 times, which was just unbelievable. I think she had 0 points until the last couple of minutes, and it was only free throws. But she was still probably one of my picks for MVP of that game, because she was just orchestrating everything from the backcourt so well, and bringing other players in a way that we hadn't really necessarily seen too much of her before. And I think now that she's got potentially even better players around her, the fact that she started to learn that is going to be positive. But also in terms of pressure, she's a player that she's probably had pressure on her since being born, bearing in mind who she is, who her family is, where she is. Everyone will have expected her to be something really special from a very young age. And here she is, franchise player for the Sheffield Hatters herself. So I think she is the kind of person that's used to it. And I think she's definitely matured as a player, even within the past few months, as I say, in terms of how she can bring others around her in the same way that Marina Fernandez-Pardo, I think, does really well.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on this one, to be honest. I don't think the pressure's going to get her at all. If anything, I think we're going to see a ridiculous year where she could be the MVP of the regular season. I think she's definitely one to watch out for. Obviously, we don't know, we've said it, who's coming into the league, but when you've got someone who's established, who's experienced, who's had that growth last season, now has a championship, and like you say, she's playing 3x3 for Great Britain in the summer, it just feels like she's going to be in a different place in her career this season, and it's going to be so interesting to see how she gets on.
Yeah, one other thing I think she has over a lot of players coming in is that she doesn't have the uncertainty of not knowing herself how she's going to adapt to the league, because she doesn't have to adapt to this league. She knows this league as well as anyone else in the world does. So I think she'll know that she's good enough, and I think she'll know that she's improved in all sorts of aspects of her game. And that's something that someone coming in, even if they've had a fantastic year abroad, they don't necessarily have that certainty. They're going, am I going to be not necessarily good enough for this league, but am I the right kind of player for this league? Do I fit into this team? That kind of thing. And yeah, she doesn't have that at all.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with Ollie. No, we'll move on from the Hatters and the Eagles. We'll move on.
If we must.
Just a question of, I know, if we've got it. Just moving on to the league in general. If there's one team, now we've basically got the rosters confirmed. There's a couple of teams where the Nottingham Wildcats, I have searched high and low. I've managed to get a few players, but it's been a bit of a stress trying to find out who they're signing. And
yeah, London Lions as well.
Yeah, London Lions, they've confirmed Macy.
It's Macy Spinks and Monique Esbrand, and that's it.
On the roster.
Yeah.
Not much at all, but for you, when we assess the teams, obviously it's hard to assess teams that haven't signed players. Is the one particular team that's not Sheffield that's going to really, and it doesn't have to be good, it could be bad, is the one team you think is to maybe going to have an indifferent season this year that we should watch out for?
I think the Rebels have missed out on a lot of talent over the off-season. They've brought in some good young talent, for sure, from within the UK. But Lauren Park Lane with the assists and her 3-pointers, Brooke Flowers with her rebounds and blocks, Taylor O'Brien with her 19 points on average per game. That's they were the big three for me, and they've lost all of them. And it was funny because actually they were three players that were so clearly above the level of everyone else. It just kind of balanced out, and they were just okay. They could take a team a long way. They played very, very well against the Hatters towards the end of the season. But now that they don't have that, they've lost a lot of the, probably, I don't know if it's a leadership, but, the best players lead from the front. Even if they don't have those leadership abilities, people see them playing well, and then they lift themselves up. And these young players coming in that don't have that to look at, I just wonder whether potentially this wasn't the time to bring in the young players. So I think they'll have a tricky season, but I am really excited about the Gladiators, looking at some of the players that they brought in. I think they've been very shrewd. They've kind of gone with the Hatters style and bringing an NBL1 player in, but also they've done what they know. They've signed players that they know are very good in this league, and they've only lost a couple of players. So I think that's probably my biggest rises and biggest droppers out of the two, I think, in the table next season.
Yeah, I was thinking the same about Essex, it feels like. And it's much like Newcastle, kind of in a different sense, where you've got that core of players who seem to excel in certain moments. Obviously, it's not to the point where they've raised them to championship contenders, but there was an impressive core to build on. And I guess that is kind of one of the problems with the league at times, is that the players are there to build on, but are the finances, is the infrastructure there to keep hold of that team and bring more in?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Essex are going to be interesting, but for me, it's got to be the Gladiators. There's something of the way they've signed players, the way they've brought players in that roster. Like you see, it's not like you're not bringing players in from the unknown. You're like, they are established. Yeah. And if that side glue, if the gel, it's going to be, I've got them in Sheffield to maybe be competing for the 1 and 2 spots, because I'm not quite sure about Manchester just yet. But I think Caledonia and the Hatters are definitely the ones to watch. Talking about Manchester, actually, just going off cue because it just came in your head. Have you? I haven't heard anything about Danny Williams. I just saw.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's very true. I haven't seen.
And that'll be
I'm
a
gonna
big
Google
blow. If
now.
Keep her.
I'm just
I
gonna
think they'll
see.
definitely contend, but I've heard nothing at all. I can't find anything about a signing anywhere. But that is, that's quite a potentially big one.
Yeah, it's a good point, because I do feel like there's something in the back of my mind that was thinking at some point I've gone, oh, that's a shame she's not coming back, but I don't know.
It's one to
there we
I was
go.
checking beforehand, but I couldn't.
She's signed in Greece.
Oh, you are joking. Greece of all, she could have at least gone to Australia and got a decent lifestyle. By the looks of it, Greeks have got a good league over there, so that is disappointing. But I still think Manchester have the roster to go out and do some damage. So yeah, I think definitely keep an eye on them too. What we'll do now is, sorry Ollie, we'll talk about Oakland's a little bit, because I feel like we haven't touched on them loads. And like we did mention Sam Ashby, when you lose a player of that calibre, when she goes obviously overseas, how much do you think that'll affect them, or do you think they can still compete at the top of the championship?
Well, I mean, she was the definition of a big game player. I mean, her not cup final, although cup final she was MVP as well. Player final performance was just unbelievable. Those 2 games were probably 2 of her best performances. I'm really, really pleased for her getting that move abroad, but it is a real shame for the league to not have her anymore. But I think what they've done really well is they've brought people in that have the experience that will kind of match what she had as a person. Enissa Pounds has just won the championship in Finland, so she knows what it's like to win. And Devon Brookshire has Euro Cup experience. She knows what it's like to be playing on the big occasion. And I think that's really what they'll be missing with Sam Ashby gone. It's that big game player, and I think those are 2 players that definitely kind of between them are going to do some way of kind of bringing that back. But I think they have done pretty well in retaining most of their players as well. It's only Tijana McGee-Pleasant and a couple of others that have gone, and I don't think they'll be too disappointed about most of the losses that they've made, to be honest.
They're another one that were very quiet, and I wasn't quite sure what direction they're going to go.
It took a long time.
I think they've built another squad, but in my head, I know they've brought in them 2 players. I just think, like when you talk about a player that can perform on a big occasion, I think to lose Sam Ashby. And by the way, I'm actually buzzing for her to get the move over there, because I think that's kind of the move she had to make for her career, as much as I hate to say it. But I feel like she can excel and become something of the level of like Holly Winterburn, where you're playing in the best competitions and you're competing up there. And that's what we need for Team GB as well, if we're going to start competing in competitions like that. Devastated to see her go, but I'm delighted for her personally. But for me, I just can't. It's probably one where I'm going to have to see Oakland's play. But I don't think they're going to be in the 1 and 2 spots. I think they will challenge come playoffs and maybe for a cup. But for me, I'm not quite sure how they're going to get on. It's a really tough one.
I think teams started to kind of work them out a little bit. I think at the start of the season, everyone just thought, where on earth have these guys come from? I think they started a little bit to unpick a bit of that, and I think definitely the Hatters did, obviously in that playoff final. They were also taken pretty close before that as well in the semi-finals. Yeah, it's tricky because I think they haven't necessarily regressed, but I think there are a lot of teams around them that have improved. I think we've obviously had a bit of confusion about what was going to happen with the league last year. That's not something that the Women's League has had this year, which is really nice. It's allowed us to kick on from what I think was a really positive first season of SLB. So yeah, I think they are probably one of the teams that haven't progressed too much, but on their day, they were a fantastic team last year. So, we'll see. I think they'll definitely be top 4 if they can keep most of their players together, as it does look like they will.
SLBW, to be honest, I think you're right. I think the way other teams have improved and not lost too many, I think that's why I'm so excited for the league to start. It feels like,
yeah,
mentioned there, 3 or 4 teams up the top of the championship, maybe 5 that would compete, whereas last year, I think the good teams were really good, the bad teams really...
There were definite levels, yeah.
Yeah, and it just felt like you were kind of playing in 2 separate leagues at one point, and that's why it wasn't... There was a couple of interesting matchups in the playoffs, but when you've got Oakland's playing the team that are finishing in the bottom position in the playoff standings, it's kind of one of them where you're like, oh, you know where it's going to go. So yeah. I think that's a nice way to... hopefully everyone else gets exciting, and if you've got a game that's an away game first time round, please go see a team. London Lions, for instance, if you have a game where you can go watch your other team, I know Ollie mentioned last time it's a pretty tough place to get to, but go support your women. The league's growing, it's getting exciting, and there's no reason at all why you can't. I mean, I got a ticket for... Well, actually, I'm on a rant a bit, actually. I was getting 2 tickets, £8 each, right, for the Eagles game. You tell me, Ollie, how 2 tickets for £8 add up to £19. I'll tell you how.
It's those little fees. VAT in the UK.
Wow. I'll be getting every single penny back off me mother, I'll tell you. No, man, I'm excited. I can't wait to get there on Sunday. And again, if you're an Eagles fan, we have Caledonia Gladiators first game in the men's, and I know the Newcastle All-In fan group are taking a bus over. So I know a lot of people aren't going to go there, but if you aren't on that bus, for £8, £9 if you're not going to put the code in. But the code in, it's a pretty no-brainer. Please come support them, because I think the Eagles this year, and under Chloe Gaynor, who was fantastic in her first year as a player coach, I really think there's something to be excited about here. So, like I say, if you're not going to watch the men's game, please come along and support your women, because there's absolutely no reason for you not to. But we'll move on to the SLB now, and we're starting again with, guess who? Sheffield.
Oh, go on.
That's who we're starting with. So
that's what I like to hear.
How have you, now you see that roster, now you see who's come in, Mervyn James from Surrey, how are you feeling about that personally?
I love this roster so much. I think probably the main thing that I wanted to see was Mervyn James. So I remember getting that. It was like with Marina Fernandez signing for the Hatters. It was like, this is the perfect signing. This is exactly what I've wanted. So that's obviously very, very exciting. But then Rodney Chapman, who looked like he was potentially an MVP player, getting his injury, looks like he's going to be back fit, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how he plays with Prentice Nixon, fully fit again. And again, some more signings that know this league. This is the kind of thing that we've been saying, obviously. It adds so much when you've got players that know the league. And actually, it was really unique in that we kind of got to see a sneak preview of what the Sharks were going to look like, because we had Will Lee, Mervyn James, and then Michael Chirobia, Prentice Nixon, Jordan Ratinho. These guys got to play together before they ever actually officially came onto the roster over in the TBT, which was very exciting. It was a lot of fun. And I think it just kind of showed that actually this is a team that can play without Donovan Clay, without Ricky McGill, without James Reed V. And again, not too many losses. I think a lot of people are putting the Sharks up there in the top 3. And I think in my opinion, there's a definite top 3. I think this is probably the best team that the Sharks have had in a long time, and probably the best team to push the Lions for a title.
I think that trio you mentioned there, that was going to be my next question. Rodney Chapman, who, by the way, when he came into the league, was possibly outside of Newcastle and Micah Corru, he was possibly my favourite player to watch before he got his injury. It felt like he had everything. He was always going to get his points. He was going to get on the board. It seemed like Sheffield was slowly getting to another level when him and Nixon kind of started to gel a bit.
Yeah,
Mervyn James adding to that. That's it for me, because Mervyn James isn't just a good scorer. He isn't just a physical presence on the court.
he's everything. Yeah,
In moments, in high pressure moments, and we've seen it in the TBT tournament, what you mentioned, he is ice cold. Do you think
yeah.
that trio could be the most dangerous trio in the league?
I really hope so, is my official response. But yeah, those guys, the ending of the game that was won at the TBT, I think that's where I really felt if we can get these guys together, this is going to be some team. Prentice Nixon and Mervyn James in the final moments of games are just absolutely huge. I mean, the amount of times we saw a late bucket from Prentice across the season is just unbelievable. And that's the kind of player you need to be playing well in the big games. That's what ultimately, obviously, every team that gets to the playoff semi-finals, you're very, very close and you just need to win on the day more than anything else. That's the nature of this sport. That's the nature of this league. We've got guys that do that. It didn't work out in the semi-final for whatever reason last time. But yeah, I mean, we're here before a season not knowing what it's going to be like in a year's time. So, I mean, this is kind of what we have to do. It seems silly sometimes, but we have to do it. I'm really confident that the Sharks will be top 3, probably top 2 this year. But maybe that's the Sheffield in me.
I'm very happy to stick my neck out on the line, because I've seen a lot of former players. I've obviously heard the SLB show mention it. I think everyone's pretty confident London Lions are going to top that list. I know Ant Rose said Sheffield. I'm going to stick my neck out on the line and annoy everyone and get told I know nothing. I have got Sheffield top of my list. I've went Sheffield, then London. And the reason isn't quality of squads, because I think London do have an unbelievable squad. Like, we're not going to go
100%.
through and analyse it, but I do think they've got an unbelievable squad. McGusty's someone I'm really interested in watching this year for London. But for me, I think when they enter a Euro Cup competition, and that is a chance to really announce yourself on the European stage. Not that I think they're going to go all the way, because you've got the Turkish teams, you've got the Eastern European teams who are so talented now. But we've kind of seen in pre-season, and last night did change my opinion a bit, because I watched the London Lions games back. And I think Sabonis has really got that team playing together. It seems McGusty he's going to take everything on his shoulders and try and get his. You've got a good defence there, so it did change my opinion a bit. But I think once the Euro Cup starts, that's what they want to prioritise. And I feel like that is where Sheffield can kick on. I'm really interested to see how Nixon grows this year, because he's a player that he impresses me every time he's on the floor. If he's not scoring points, which he usually does, he's going to affect the game in another way. So that's something that really interests us. And just touch wood, obviously, like you say, it's kind of crazy. You're predicting a season when you don't know what injuries are going to come, what lineups people are going to play in certain moments. You don't know what the matchups are going to be like. But Sheffield, I just honestly sticking my neck on the line. I really do. Think Sheffield are going to top it. Come playoffs, we don't know, because again, London might be out of the Euro Cup and they might go, right, playoffs is ours, we're going to take it. But yeah, I'm gonna really stick my neck on the line and say Sheffield. So if you want to join us in that, I love getting abuse. So
I would be more than happy, because that is exactly what I want to see. But you make a good point about the Euro Cup, in fairness. It does look like they've got a pretty deep roster, but if there are a couple of injuries, having to compete on all fronts, you never know. It was something that I think the Sharks did pretty well with, playing a lot of... There was one week where there were 4 games in 7 days, and the Sharks came out of it winning 3 of the 4, and that was probably what made me think this is probably a team that can finish in the top 3. I think the Lions are really going to be challenged this year in terms of the scheduling. They've obviously signed, as you mentioned, McGusty, Mike Sill, with Jonathan Williams as well. They've managed to make it a little bit deeper. They've lost Hadzibegovic, they've lost Jane Dallaire, but they haven't necessarily got a shorter roster than they did last season. I think they've probably got a deeper one. That's going to be the main thing. It really is going to be how deep that roster gets, how far into it they have to go based on injuries, roster, schedule, whatever. We don't know. But I think if the Sharks have nothing else to think about, which in theory there isn't, maybe that is a little run towards a championship.
Like I say, I'm sticking my neck out on the line. I'm going Sheffield. I wish I could go Newcastle. I'm not as down on Newcastle as everyone else is. I understand where a lot of people are coming from, and I don't think we're going to be top 4, but I think we've got a really interesting year there. I think Rashawn Taylor that's coming, he's another one I'm really interested in. Seeing him in pre-season, I just think there's a player there that you're not going to replace Micah Corru, and you shouldn't try. But what you need to do is build round that and try and make up points in other places. But obviously he comes in to replace a Corru, and I'm so interested to see how that is. And we had such a big rebounding issue last year. In mentioning like how we said about London Lions, how Europe can affect rosters, that is exactly what happened in Newcastle. We're deep in cups. Well,
Mhm.
in one we went out, the others against the Gladiators, which unfortunately I was there watching that one.
Yeah.
You can see how that can affect you. Like, it killed our whole season. We got to
Yeah.
the playoff
Yeah,
final,
no,
but then
I
we
think you're
couldn't we
right.
couldn't compete because obviously Leicester, they had the rebounders and it was relentless. You had Hunter there going at what's he called, Trey Pulliam, then they were going at each other, but around that you had Defoe injured, you had Del Pesh injured. It was a real struggle to get that roster going. So I mean, London's is deeper than ours was. London's is more talented, but it'll be really interesting to see what happens if they go deep in the Euro Cup. Again, I'm not expecting them to go too far, but I really do think they've got a good coach there and a good defense, which is where you can kind of build from. And if McGusty can find his way in that team, I think they'll really do a decent job. But when it comes to the league, that's where I'm really interested to see where they're going.
Yeah, I think with the Eagles, I mean, Okara and Pulliam are two of the guys that I saw as two of the real stars of last. I mean, there's no one that doesn't see Okara as one of the stars of the season, obviously. I think it's a team that's probably had one of the most changes to the roster, which means, again, it's obviously really hard to work out. But I think if the positivity around the league and the positivity about that cup run into the final of a European tournament, if that can be harnessed, and I think that's probably gone some way to signing better players than potentially would have been the case otherwise. If that can be harnessed, there's no reason that they shouldn't be pushing for that top four. I think it's going to be Manchester completing that top three.
Yeah.
And I think it's then going to be the Riders, the Eagles, probably Cheshire, kind of competing for those next spots. But I think there's no reason that the Eagles, if they do push on from the positivity around the club, that they can't push for that top four. Maybe the three.
I think that's a good point. If they can kick on from the good vibes, and I think they can. But like I say, I'm with you. I think Manchester's going to finish ahead. I think Leicester's ahead there, and I think that will be obviously as long as you get playoffs, because it is going to be a tough year. Because I think everyone again has kind of got Gladiators bottom of the standings. I'm kind of with them on that one.
It's a rebuild year for sure, I think, for them.
I think they've done a bad job, but I think just the way their year went last year, I think it was always going to be difficult for them to build a roster that's going to compete. And then you've got Manchester that have came out of absolutely nowhere, and that's a squad I am so interested in.
It's incredibly exciting.
Do you think Manchester are going to be, obviously you're seeing the fill the big three, do you think they could even steal one of the trophies?
Honestly, you never know. I mean, I really like the new head coach. I think Matt Otten, we've seen, I think it was something like a 32-7 record over in Austria. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but it shows that he's used to being one of those sides at the top, and he's used to having that feeling of every loss is really important. When you're at the bottom, obviously it's a little bit different in that there's no relegation, but when you're right at the bottom, it's the wins that mean the most. But it's about avoiding losses when you're one of the best teams. That's what he's used to. And if you look at Max Jones, he looks absolutely unbelievable. He's a fantastic signing. And then, players like Zach Oven that have stayed. I think the positivity around that club is unlike any other in terms of on and off the court. And I think they're showing themselves, some of the media team stuff is really good. They're showing themselves to be like, we're good enough for NBA Europe as a club. This is where we want to be as a club. We want to push. I think it's kind of showing what they're doing, that they are the Manchester club. We've got an NBA game coming over to the Carb Live. By the way, guys, if you're interested in that game, come watch the club that already plays here. It's like they're using that, and they've used it really well, I think. The graphics look fantastic. Everything around Manchester basketball is fantastic. And to think they've had to build this from the ground up in a year is incredible.
Yeah, I've got it. Do you know that's one thing? I know last year it was difficult because the league was just starting. I think that's one thing I've really been impressed by this year is the media work between London and Manchester. Because I think London has been fantastic. London has been fantastic as well. But Manchester and London, I think, they've really kicked on. I think seeing that in the off season, because obviously we've got so much turmoil and in politics going on around the sport. I think what we needed is something like that where someone's taking the initiative to go, do you know what it is? I want to get our fans excited. And I think Manchester coming from where they were to where they are now is one of the stories I'm really, really interested in seeing how it's going to go.
We needed good news, and they've definitely been giving us that, is the best way I can put it.
We need good news, but now we're going to turn to bad news. I want you to put your cards on the table. There's obviously one playoff spot. What one team that's not going to get the playoff spot? Who are you going to? I mean, I could guess who it's going to be, but who do you personally want to go for? And don't be worried about upsetting people. It's fine. We
No,
do it all the time here.
I'm going to say what everyone's expecting in the Gladiators. I just think they haven't brought in that firepower that they need. I think a lot of it's going to be on Toto Fagbenli. We saw, I don't know if you've seen the interview that he did the other day, kind of saying how fired up he was for next season. I think he is the kind of guy that could be their franchise player for this season that can help pull them up. But I just don't see the caliber of player that they've signed as being able to push them any higher. I think even if you look at someone like Surrey, who have lost a lot of good players, some of them to the Sharks, they still do have some firepower, and they've got the experience of obviously making it through to a cup final as well, and that's just not something that the Gladiators have. I think Bristol are going to be down there as well, but it just kind of feel like the Gladiators potentially themselves have kind of accepted the fact that this probably isn't going to be their year.
Yeah, I think and as if I'm a Gladiator fan, I'll probably take that on board, and I think that would kind of make it exciting, because you just mentioned Toto there, and I think if I was a Gladiator fan, I would go, right, I'm not expecting much from the roster. What are you going to do? Like, how are you going to take us? Can you grab this game by the scruff of the neck and just give us a performance, something to enjoy? What you don't want if you're the bottom team is to get blown out every night, every time you play. In those games,
and I don't think they will be.
No, definitely not. When I watched the Gladiators, I actually felt sorry for their fans at time last year, because it was just a bit of just everything from the top of the club to the bottom of the club. It just wasn't going their way. There was so much going on. And I think from them this year, they might accept they're going to come near the bottom. But what I would like to say if I was a fan, and I don't know what you think, but you want to see one or two players where you can pin your future on and go, yeah, I know we don't keep players for a couple of years, but that is someone that I'd like to target and build a squad around.
Yeah, it's not very common in our game, but all you can really ask for is for every player to play like they want to be that. If you've got every single player at least trying to be that player that fights for that badge, that is willing to be there beyond just the current season, is fighting for the club, not just now, but in the future, then you're in a pretty good spot and you don't have too much to complain about as a fan. And I think when you've got someone that's so synonymous with the British game at the moment, he's the kind of guy that you would probably be pushing to be that guy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good. I will be watching the Gladiators just for Toto. Well, you touched on Surrey then. We can't go into everyone, unfortunately. We've definitely not got that kind of time. We've got Bristol, who I agree might be down the bottom, but Surrey's a team I actually love watching. They've got a really young roster. I think the way they bring British players through, it's what I would like to talk about for one more time. But to be honest, again, it's another roster I look at and I don't really know that much about. Obviously, you got Nidas there, who I'm really, again, like Toto, I'm kind of expecting or hoping that he can kick on and like maybe build, again, because Surrey have kept him. It would be nice to see him go, right, I want to be that player. I'm going to take over and see what I can do with it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think he's another player that's got a lot of expectation now. Obviously, with Mervyn James gone, that's a big name out the door. But even so young, he's kind of already one of the big names. So people will probably be expecting him to step up, because that's one more year. Obviously, as a young player, every year is a potential for a lot of improvement. I think he had that, and he was already very good at the start of the season as well. I think the fact that he has stayed on is probably the biggest thing that they could have hoped for in the off-season. And there are all sorts of players that have signed. I mean, Ronald Polite the third is one of the best names I've ever heard. I don't know much about him, but I know he's got a good name. But as long as they've got a Nidas Cherlovinskas that's the kind of player that we know he can be, then I think they'll be all right.
Yeah, that's it. I think that's one of the things with the kinds of Surrey and stuff. I think because we're seeing with Mervyn James last year, I think it's about having them players you can get excited about and you want to watch the teams for. Because unfortunately, you can't have every team with London Lions roster or Sheffield's roster, can you?
Yeah.
So finally, this time I'm not going to stitch her up as much as last time, but I would like to hear, obviously I think a lot of people are going McGusty for MVP. I'd love to hear who you think is going to take that title.
It's funny because I was actually really surprised that Aaron Ray had been given the MVP. I think he was very, very consistent, but he didn't strike me as the kind of player that would be given MVP.
I think if London Lions didn't finish top of them standings, I don't think he was getting it personally. I think that contributed quite high. He had a great season, don't get us wrong.
100%,
and he's another player that I'm interested in seeing where he goes this year with that new roster, with other people playing ahead of him. That's interesting, but yeah, I'm kind of with you on that one.
Yeah, the reason I mention it is just because I think if we're saying we're predicting who's going to be given the official MVP, then it kind of throws a spanner in the works, because it shows that I've got a very different idea of what an MVP is to what the league does. But I'm gonna go for it. And I'm gonna say Prentice Nixon. because I think if the Sheffield Sharks do turn out to be the best team in the league, it's going to be him that's the reason. And that will be more than enough reason in itself to give him the award.
Top, and I can't say Sheffield are going to win and then go for McGusty, because I feel I'm the same as you. When EP, that's the issue. Who are you going for? But for me this year, I'm going to say it, and I'm going to again put my neck on the line. Rodney Chapman. I'm expecting big things from me boy this year. Like, I'm really hoping he can kick on and do something.
Yeah, he certainly looked like he could do it before the injury last season. It was such a shame. And it was quite nice in that there was still Donovan Clay that kind of had that firepower, that star factor.
Yeah.
In that team. But I think Rodney Chapman on form, fit, is going to be quite something. Just feel like because he's got that year behind him, he's had that TBT, he's had a good pre-season by the sounds of things. For me, it's just about Prentice.
Yeah. Do you know what it is?
That's what sets them apart for me.
I feel like we're Team Sheffield all the way here, but that's such an exciting duo as well, isn't it? Like Prentice Nixon and Rodney Chapman, and then your third option's Mervyn James. It's just...
Yeah.
People are going to think I'm
league top scorer.
These are all our own opinions. This has got nothing to do with Sheffield.
Yeah. It's nothing to do with the shirt I've got on
this year that I need to watch out. But well, no, Ollie, that's you have done it. You've got to another interrogation, a second time round. Congratulations.
Perfect. Pal. Thank you very much.
Well, I don't know how invested you are in the NCAA, but coming up in the next few weeks, next week, I've got an interview with Maggie from Richmond, Maggie Dugan, she is a magnificent player. She led them to their first win in the NCAA tournament last year, and she's definitely one to watch out come this year. And in a few weeks' time, I've also got the Duke assistant coach, Kyra Elsie, coming on ahead of Duke versus Baylor's game in Paris, which I'm really trying to get to. But having a daughter is making that complicated, but I'm really trying to get over there for that game. But so if anyone's interested in the NCAA, I am trying to work with universities and get a few interviews on with not just the women's players, but I am pushing for women's players, because I think that's one thing, Ollie. I think promotion and we've mentioned it a couple of times already, we're talking about promoting the SLB and the SLBW. It's pretty difficult when you don't know the players coming in. So that's something I know is such a struggle, because how do you put the infrastructure there? But I feel like if people can get a grasp of the NCAA, maybe lower D1 and D2, which is, again, more difficult because how do you get the eyes on it? That would actually help the British game, because then you know who's coming in, you know who to be excited about. So I am pushing to try and get people on and get more NCAA interviews.
The fact that it's on Sky is definitely a positive over anything else, really.
Yeah, that's it. And look at... I can't stop coughing here. Look at the way the football... I know college basketball is a bit different. It's not as like... You've not got 100,000 people in the stadium, but I don't know if you watch the NFL, like the NCAA football. It is magnificent. The way they get behind young recruits.
It's unbelievable,
You kind of know players coming into the NFL before they're there. And that's something that I would love to see happen in the SLB, where we'll get to a point where we're not like looking for highlights, because highlights shows nothing, where we'll actually have a good understanding of a few players coming in.
Yeah.
It would be nice if we would get there. So that's me aim. We're going to aim for some NCAA stuff and see if we can bring that game on, Ollie.
I love it.
So, no, thank you very much, mate. I really appreciate you coming on.
Pleasure to be here.
We will turn this round and we'll get this out today, Ollie. You watch. We'll have it out.
I'll believe it when I see it. Right?
Thank you for everyone listening, and thanks again, Ollie.
Cheers, mate.